Hello, guys, and welcome back to the NW Sportscast. We have a few big hirings. We've been waiting for the official announcement to really voice our opinions on this, but we got some huge hirings. We got Aden Durde. We obviously have Ryan Grubb, and then Jay Harbaugh for special teams, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator in particular. So, Levi, what is your initial reaction to these hirings? Because this is a big deal. This is where we're starting to move in the future of Seattle football. All three of these guys had very little connection with Mike McDonald outside of maybe Jay Harbaugh. I'm not sure what is it with them, but the two main defensive coordinator and OC, they didn't have any connection with him, and they still went out and got it. I think that's really a testament to what the Seahawks will do in the future. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't want to sound like I'm like super excited because I mean, we hired two guys who don't really have the experience, Aden Durde, he was an assistant for the Cowboys, so you'd think he's probably familiar with Dan Quinn's scheme. The Cowboys did have a good defense, so that plays into his favor, but he's also
Yeah.
never been a defensive coordinator before. So it's hard for me to know how good he's going to be. Also, he doesn't necessarily need to be great because he's not going to be calling the plays. So he's kind of the defensive coordinator in name only, where he will sit on the meetings. He'll obviously play a role in practices and in the pregame preparations, but Mike McDonald's going to really be effectively the defensive coordinator. And then like Ryan Grubb, yeah, his offense worked really well at UW. And again, it begs the question: A, was it him or was it DeBoer? And then B, does that offensive system translate to the NFL? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm not gonna, predict that the offense is going to be incredible because a lot of times coaches come from college and then fail in the NFL. And
I
then
think
Jay
there's a third
Harbaugh,
point.
what's
There's
that?
definitely, I think there's a third point to that. The Penix potential, I think,
Yeah, panics too.
exponentially with now
Yeah,
Ryan
I
Grubb.
agree.
Yeah,
Jay Harbaugh is interesting. Jim hiring Jim's son. But yeah, what do you think about the hirings, Drew?
I like him a lot.
Okay.
Like you said, I'll start with the DC. It's going to be run through Mike McDonald, but you know, Mike McDonald went on 7-10, and he had some really, really good things to say about Adam Durde. One of the main things he saw, and this is a quote, he said, just listening to him talk about how he sees the game was very similar to how I saw it in terms of what you needed to do to be able to defend offenses these days. And he had some really interesting perspective. So, from what that kind of indicates, is that this is a guy that isn't necessarily going to clash heads with McDonald. They're on the same page, but he'll also be able to throw in some wrinkles and be that guy that Mike McDonald can go talk to with and kind of bounce ideas off. And they're both having the same perspective as far as what their defense should look like in 2024. So that's really, really interesting to me. And I like the hire. But again, not super important. It's not the big one because Mike McDonald will take the DC role, and that's pretty much his role. You look at the other side, Ryan Grubb, the most interesting hire for the Seahawks outside of Mike McDonald was obviously this offensive coordinator. It's not McDonald's bread and butter. There's definitely a lot of things that McDonald will contribute to on the offensive side of the ball, but this will be mostly Ryan Grubb's system. And it was a system that worked really, really well at Washington. A lot of people think of Washington as a really flashy team that like to throw the ball to Roma Dunze, kind of chuck it up to McMillan, Polk, etc. This is a team that their first priority was offensive line. This is an offensive line heavy, mindset coach. So I think that is really, really crucial for the Seahawks moving forward. Geno Smith, he was pressured all year long, especially when Abe Lucas wasn't there. I think if we don't draft a quarterback in that first round, I think it might go to an offensive lineman. And I think that's going to be because of Ryan Grubb's philosophy behind protecting the quarterback. Does Penix now become much higher possibility to be a Seahawk? I would say yes, especially with a lot of the reports of him falling outside of the first round. I think Penix might be able to be scooped up, in the second or third round. I don't think we have a second round pick this year, but either way, this really does change the mindset going forward as far as the Penix move, how the offense is approached, and how he attacks teams. And then you look at, the Harbaugh son, Jay Harbaugh. This is a guy that, he's young. He has that same mentality as Harbaugh. He's grown up with him. A father instills a lot of the same mindset that he has onto his son. Like father, like son. It's a
Yeah.
saying for a reason. And that is a good thing in this particular scenario. Because, father Papa Harbaugh, he's a pretty damn good coach. And as much as whatever you can say about the guy, he's a darn good coach. And Jay
Yeah.
Harbaugh can now come to the Seahawks and still a little bit of that. And special teams, underrated part of football, Levi. The special teams just won the Super Bowl for the
Oh
Chiefs.
yeah. I mean,
Without
Harrison
that,
Butker should have been the MVP of that game.
I mean, both kickers and then the blocked field goal was the difference maker. So it's kind of like, this is not just something to sneeze at either. But yes, Ryan Grubb, I think that was the biggest hiring.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. Ryan Grubb is big, and you mentioned drafting Penix, and if we do think that we can get him in the second round, I see no reason why we can't trade up. It shouldn't be that big of a deal if you want to give up a couple of other draft picks, move up into the second round, and take him. And I know fans will be mad. I know fans will complain. Fans will say, Geno is an MVP and Penix is a scrub who can't play, and they know ball better than the Seahawks do. Yeah, I'm sure. But I would say this, drafting Penix, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. And then look, if Geno balls out,
I really agree.
If Geno balls out in training camp, then fine. Keep starting Geno, let Penix sit on the bench for a year and let him learn and let him develop. That's fine. Like, I'm not saying I think we need to replace Geno right now, but having a backup plan is, I don't see any reason why that's bad. And it's not a waste of a draft pick. It's never a waste of a draft pick for a quarterback, because as we've seen, even if he's not going to end up being a starter, teams that don't have a good backup fall apart, right? They fall apart. I mean, you look at the Steelers and the Bengals, and last year the Ravens and the Dolphins, teams that get off to really good starts, their quarterback gets hurt, and then they either miss the playoffs or get blown out in round one when they don't have their starter. So even if Penix isn't going to be a starter, why not draft him,
Definitely.
and
Penix
give him a system he's familiar with.
Yeah, Ryan Grubb, it'll be a very similar system to Washington. And that might be a bad thing, but that could also be a really, really good thing, especially if we draft Penix, Levi.
Yeah, well, how do you think the Grubb offense will translate to the NFL? Because in college it worked really well.
He really likes to spread wide receivers out. He often has a receiver all the way at the right hash and a guy at the left hash. He likes to, spread those guys out. He likes to implement the run game a lot, but he allows his quarterback to throw the ball downfield. And Geno Smith, he throws, a pretty good deep ball. I would say not anything to sneeze at for sure. So if we have Geno Smith next year, I think he will be airing it out a lot more. And when you look at dynamic wide receivers, the Seahawks have those guys. DK Metcalf might be the most dynamic wide receiver at the peak of his game. He is the fastest. He's the strongest. He can jump the highest. This is a guy that kind of how Rome Odunze handled things. Odunze's, don't get me wrong, a really, really good route runner, but he out-physicaled a lot of guys. A lot of times Penix would throw it up, him being covered, knowing that he will just get his hands on the ball and he will get into a position to outdo the cornerback. I think Ryan Grubb is going to put DK Metcalf in particular in a lot more of those situations, kind of use him as a Rome Odunze type of player. But it's going to be hard to see what actually translates to the NFL because he's not going to be able to, really rough up on 6'1" corners out of Arizona State, or a slow corner out of Utah. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly.
These are the elite of the elite. I think it'll be fine, and I think it'll translate. But I'm not an offensive coordinator, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to be fully convinced until I see it. But I'm really excited, and this is a hire that I really wanted to happen, and I didn't think was going to happen. It's kind of like the, let's see if Penix goes to the Seahawks. Let's see if Ryan Grubb. Let's see if Pete Carroll, goes to the Huskies. It's kind of like a hometown type of thing, just something you secretly root for because you want to keep your hometown guys in Seattle, and it did. and that's super, super exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I want to ask you, Drew, on the topic of the receivers. I've seen some controversy today happening on the internet of Seahawks fans, and the topic that has now been a subject of controversy for 2 off seasons in a row, trading DK Metcalf. And it all started, Mike Salk, one of my favorite 710 radio hosts.
Okay. Yeah.
He wrote a piece saying maybe, he not saying that he thinks they should, but saying maybe the Seahawks could look into trading DK. And the basis of it was essentially saying the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill and then they won back-to-back Super Bowls. And partially it was because the money allowed them to free up their cap space to pay more of their defensive players. It allowed them to have a stronger defense. And they also obviously hit a huge home run on their draft pick that they got back from Tyreek Hill in Trent McDuffie. So he's basically saying, look at what the Chiefs did. They traded their receiver. They got better. They won the Super Bowl, and they proved that you don't necessarily need an elite weapon to win, an elite wide receiver to win when you have the quarterback and the O-line and the D-line in place. And fans completely just assaulted Mike Salk on the internet today, saying how awful he is, how stupid he is, and how DK Metcalf should be untouchable. So what do you think? Do you think that DK Metcalf is untouchable?
Yes.
You think he's untouchable?
Short answer is yes. And I'm going to preface this with saying that I really like, I really like what they do down there at 710. I love Salk, so this is not an indictment on him at all. I think what he's doing is amazing, and I really love.
And he didn't say he thinks we should trade him. He just said maybe we could look into the option.
Yeah, it's possibility. So with that being said, though, I will say I do disagree with his ideology saying, look at the Chiefs, because I don't think that's a comparable thing to look at. Mm-hmm. The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, and the Seahawks have Geno Smith, and you could look at it the other way. You could look at it as the 49ers got to a Super Bowl because they had all of these weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
And because they have an average quarterback, but just so many weapons that it's so hard for teams to stop. It's kind of like you want a lot of different gadgets in your Swiss Army knife. You don't want just one big butcher knife unless it's in the best, unless it's a samurai sword, which is what Patrick Mahomes is. And right now, you don't got a samurai sword. You got a regular old, kitchen knife. You got to surround that kitchen knife with all of the tools and gadgets in order for that to succeed. And right now, you're not working with Patrick Mahomes. You're working with Geno Smith. You're working with a Michael Penix potential, a JJ McCarthy. This is not a guy who you're going to be able to get away with just JSN and Tyler Lockett. It's just not going to happen.
Especially with Tyler on the decline, right?
Especially. I mean, JSN's on the rise, so you could argue that balances that out. But either way, you need DK Metcalf there in order to give Geno Smith the plethora of options on the offensive side of the ball. I agree. For the Chiefs, it was the right move. For the Seahawks, it's not.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think that I wouldn't say he's completely untouchable. I don't think anyone truly is. If you get the perfect deal, if some team calls you and says, we'll trade you 2 first-round picks and, multiple player, like we'll trade you a number 3 receiver and 2 first-round picks. Obviously, that's not going to happen. DK is not that valuable, but for the perfect deal, maybe. But I agree. I think that DK is almost like the Seahawks version of Travis Kelce in the sense that he's the guy you're asking to out-physical the opponents. And he is one of the best at it. He's strong, tall, can run great routes, catches impossible passes. Sometimes Geno, I think, gets scared to throw those balls up to him. But when Geno does throw the balls up to him, he usually makes the catch. And so I agree. I think when you're trying to develop either an average quarterback like Geno, and yes, we both admit that he's average. There's some fans that would tell us that he's an MVP candidate.
There's some tell you that he's terrible. So
there's some tell you that. Then there's some will tell you that he should be on the bench. But I think he is. I think he is good. But you're right. He's a Brock Purdy level quarterback. So you need those weapons. I agree. I think DK is fairly important to the build of the team right now.
And DK had what? He has 1 more year in his contract.
Does he only have one?
He signed a 3-year contract July 28th,
Okay.
2022.
Well, then in that case, honestly, I would extend him.
Yeah, I would extend him too.
Maybe
Again,
give him 2 more years. I don't know what he's looking for though.
I would see where his head's at as far as money wise.
Yeah.
To be honest, DK really hasn't performed to an elite wide receiver level.
I think
So
he has the elite tools. I think
I
that
agree. I agree. I
in
don't
the
think his
system,
production has shown that.
I think that because the production has been rough because the system that he's in has not been conducive to his talents, and
You got
B,
Tyler Lockett, Jason.
just the quarterback that he's had hasn't. I mean, Gino isn't willing a lot of times to attempt those throws that are one-on-one downfield to DK Metcalf. And DK he's voiced his criticism of that, but Gino is worried about underthrowing him, I think, and throwing that pick. But the times when Gino does underthrow DK, he doesn't throw picks because DK gets it anyways. That's what I've noticed, at least. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, the eye test shows DK Metcalf is a really good receiver, but there's a lot of things you can look at and point out as flaws. He's really emotional.
Yeah, that's true.
He disappears for large portions of the game sometimes.
And so did Travis Kelce in the Super Bowl.
True.
Look at him. Did 1 yard in the first half, yelling at his coach, emotional.
I'm playing devil's.
No, I agree.
I'm saying there's a lot of things you can poke in DK Metcalf's game, and the numbers aren't there yet at an elite wide receiver level. I don't think anyone can really argue with that. So maybe if you're DK Metcalf and you're his agent, you look at another 2-year deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you're not looking for that 8-year extension right now. It's not going to be 8 years.
No wide receivers getting that.
It's football, exactly. But, maybe you're not looking for that 4 or 5-year extension worth, like $45 million a year or whatever. I mean, again, that's a lot of money. But maybe you're looking for a kind of prove it 1 or 2-year extension. And I think the Seahawks should really start to consider where is DK Metcalf's head at. Because if he asks $40 million a year, maybe you do just trade him this year and get some value. And another point, the Patriots, they've been rumored to trade down. And they're at the 3rd overall pick. So,
I don't think that's happening. Who's saying that?
The rumor is the Patriots might trade down in the draft.
Where's that rumor coming from?
I heard that about a week ago. So
really,
yeah,
because I heard their coach basically said, we want to take the best quarterback we can get. So that's interesting that they would trade down.
I think the report was that they like a few different guys in the draft and they'd be willing to trade down and still draft a later guy. I'm not entirely sure. I'm gonna look at that again, but that's what I heard. So let's say they trade down and maybe you give him DK Metcalf in your first and you trade for the 3rd there. That's something I would consider.
I mean, if you're trading up to the 3rd to draft Jaden Daniels, then I would give up DK Metcalf to have Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give him up for much else though.
Yeah, NBC Sports Boston report Patriots are considering trading down and addressing free agency instead of the draft.
Okay, so then I mean if they go out and sign Kirk Cousins or something like that, yeah.
98.5 the Sports Hub also said that. MassLive.com. So there's a few different studies. It's not ESPN or anything, but
I was not aware of those rumors. Wow.
There is I did see this report. I was just it might not happen, but if you can get DK Metcalf and still get the 16th overall pick and then get Russell Wilson or in the free agency, maybe that's a route you go with if you're the Patriots. And in that case,
reunite Russ with DK. That could be interesting.
So in that case, then it's maybe do trade DK because then all of a sudden you've got a guy that isn't just has a potential to not be an average quarterback in Jaden Daniels.
I feel like the comp for Jaden Daniels is Lamar, and people act like that's a bad thing. People act like, oh, he's just a running quarterback, but
he's not.
But like, if his comp is Lamar, then obviously you trade for him. Like Lamar is not Lamar. The reason Lamar can't win a Super Bowl is not because Lamar's not good enough. It's because it just so happens that he plays in the same league as Patrick Mahomes, and so he's just I mean, it's the same thing as Josh Allen. Josh Allen, if Josh Allen or Lamar were on the Chiefs, they'd probably be the ones winning the Super Bowls. Or maybe not because it's just how good Mahomes is. But it's just like the problem is when there's a dynasty, neither of them have a chance no matter how good they are. But that's not to say that they're bad. That's not to say that if you can draft the next Lamar, obviously.
Yeah, we were like really going down the rabbit hole, hypothetical route. But let's say we draft Jaden Daniels. Going back to our first segment, do you think Ryan Grubb could scheme an offense around a running quarterback? Something that Penix kind of, he was a lot more in Indiana and at Fresno, but not so much
Yeah.
at Washington.
I mean, ultimately, it's up to it's can they work together and form that offensive system?
Do you draft Jaden at 3?
Yes. Oh yeah. Honestly, in my opinion, I would draft him at 2 if I was Washington, but it sounds like they are going to draft Drake May at 2.
Yeah, so I don't know if I want to draft Drake May at 3.
No, I think Drake May, out of the 3 great quarterback prospects, and maybe this is completely wrong. Knowing me, it probably is because most of my takes end up being wrong. But the way I see it, Caleb has the most potential, and then Jaden Daniels has the second most. Maybe Drake May has a higher floor, but to me, Drake May reminds me of Mac Jones. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
I don't know if Mac Jones is the comp, but I would agree the floor is higher than Jaden, but not the ceiling. And
he feels like a guy who's just going to be average.
Personally, in quarterbacks especially, but in most players, I draft for ceiling. If I'm
exactly, you're drafting for ceiling.
Yeah, unless it's like a 6th round pick where you got an offensive lineman that you think will be a solid backup, then maybe that type of guy.
But your first round draft pick should be ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. So that was all the coaching hires. We talked some draft stuff, which we weren't really expecting to do. We got a lot of good stuff in this episode of the NW Sportscast. Levi, you got anything else for us?
I don't know. I mean, closing words, happy about the hiring, and hopefully the fans can all calm down on the internet. It's going to be a long off season.
Final words for me. I love all 3 hires. I love all 4 hires. The Seahawks killed this offseason with hiring guys to fill in Pete Carroll and that, former regime. And, it's just reminiscent of 2024 has been a really good offseason for the Mariners and the Seahawks outside of obviously the peak, that whole fiasco. But, outside of that, they've been both really, really solid. I'm super happy for that. And I would not trade DK Metcalf unless it's to draft a Jaden McDaniels from LSU in the top 3 of the draft. And that's my take. That'll do it for us. This is the NW Sportscast. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help out the channel a lot. We're trying to grow this thing, really trying to post more shorts and do a lot of those things, try to be consistent with it. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and that's all for me.
All right. As always, Drew, go Seahawks, go Mariners, and we'll see you guys in the next one.